And so this conference is the Berlin Conference, which is where the famous or infamous Scramble for Africa happened. Because when he calls all of these countries and they see what he's done and what he's trying to do by getting them to recognize his authority over all of these territories, they also realize that, maybe there is something to shifting our attention away from North and South America to this place that nobody knows much about. Well, nobody in Europe, anyway. As they are recognizing and acknowledging Leopold's dominion over this territory, they also now start carving out a few bits for themselves to claim and to own. Because at the time, obviously, as I mentioned before, they were being kicked out of North and South America. It was also a very pivotal time because that's around the time that slavery was being abolished and it was starting to become more unfavorably looked upon by most people within all of these Western circles. And slavery itself was a very, very expensive exercise. It was expensive to get slaves, to transport them to the UK, then transport them to the colonies, make sure you feed them and keep them alive throughout doing all of this. When you're working them on the land, you need to make sure that you give them a space to live. You need to make sure that you've taken care of all of that. And all of that was very, very expensive to do. So the strategy of all of these countries was starting to shift from owning and taking all of these slaves for themselves on their territories to basically having small territories within Africa where they kept large pools of labor that they didn't have to administer to the same extent that they did when they were taking slaves and shipping them all over the world. So this is when the Berlin Conference happens. And so the Berlin Conference happened between November 1884 and February of 1885. And the conference was attended by Austria-Hungary, Russia, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, Britain, Portugal, Turkey, and the United States, also the Netherlands and Sweden, Norway. And these countries all came together and they obviously, they split as much territory as they could for themselves. The biggest beneficiaries of this being obviously Leopold, with the giant chunk of land that he took that would later be established into the Congo Free State, the British Crown, obviously, the French and the Germans. These are the people that kind of benefited the most from the Berlin Conference. And so the Berlin Conference finishes and Leopold establishes the Congo Free State in 1886. And at the time that the Congo Free State was established, it wasn't a colony that belonged to the Belgian crown. It was essentially Leopold's personal property. He owned it, and he was to do with it whatever he pleased.